In 1876, New Mexico Territory, a Navajo warrior named Hastien Tso walked into a land office with $5 and walked out owning 60 acres of cursed ground. What he found living in the abandoned barn would force him to choose between the warrior he'd been trained to be and the man he was desperate to become. Before we dive into the story, click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more shocking stories tomorrow. Also, leave a comment on where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now let's continue with the story. The land office in Santa Fe smelled like old paper and broken promises. Hastien Tso stood at the counter, his Army Scout pay weighing heavy in his palm. $5. Everything he'd earned tracking Apache raiders for the same government that had forced his people on the Long Walk 14 years ago. The clerk looked at him like he was a ghost. Most folks did. A Navajo in town always raised questions, and a Navajo with money raised suspicions. "The Cimarron property," Hastien said. His English was clean, learned during the years at Bosque Redondo when speaking his own language earned beatings. "I'll take it." The clerk's eyebrows shot up. "You know why it's $5, don't you? Previous owner died there. Neighbors say the place is cursed. No one set foot on it in 6 months. Hastien placed the coins on the counter one at a time. The metallic clink echoed in the small office. Cursed land was still land. And land meant he could stop tracking for the army, stop leading soldiers to people who looked like his dead brother, stop waking up, tasting guilt. The clerk shrugged and pushed the deed across. Just like that, Hastien owned something. For the first time since Bosque Redondo, he had a place that couldn't be taken away by soldiers, or treaties, or lies. The ride to Cimarron took 3 days. The property sat at the base of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, isolated enough that neighbors were dots on the horizon. When Hastien finally saw his ranch, his stomach dropped. The house leaned like a drunk. The fence posts had collapsed. Sagebrush had reclaimed what used to be fields, but it was the barn that held his attention. Large, dark, and somehow still standing when everything else was falling apart. As the sun dropped behind the mountains, he heard it, a sound from inside the barn. Heavy, deliberate, something big moving in the darkness. He approached slowly, hand near his knife. The door hung crooked on its hinges. The sound came again. Not a coyote. Not a bear. Something else. Hastien pulled the door open. The last of the daylight spilled into the darkness, and 2 wild eyes stared back at him from the shadows. A horse. Massive, spotted, and half mad with fear. The animal lunged at the stall gate, teeth bared, a sound like thunder coming from its chest. Hastien stepped back. The previous owner hadn't died from a curse. He'd died trying to handle this animal. And this furious, starving creature was his problem. He looked at the horse. The horse looked back, both of them trapped by circumstances neither had chosen. "You and me both," Hastien whispered. Hastien spent that first night in the broken house, listening to the horse destroy what was left of the barn. The crashes came in waves, wood splintering, metal rattling. The animal was tearing itself apart, trying to escape. At dawn, he walked back to the barn with a bucket of water from the well. The horse stood in the corner of the stall, ribs showing through its spotted coat like ladder rungs. Its mane was matted with filth. Dried blood streaked its legs where it had kicked the walls. When Hastien approached, the stallion charged the stall gate. The wood groaned but held. The horse screamed, a sound that raised the hair on Hastien's neck. He set the water bucket down just outside the stall and stepped back. The horse watched him, sides heaving, eyes showing white all around. Hastian had tracked enough animals to recognize the look. This wasn't aggression. This was terror, wearing an aggressive mask. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said in Navajo. The words felt strange in his mouth. He hadn't spoken his language aloud in years. At Bosque Redondo, they'd beaten it out of him. With the army, he'd buried it deeper. The horse didn't move toward the water. Too afraid, too proud, too broken. Hastian understood that. He brought hay next, old and dusty from the loft, but still good enough. He tossed it over the gate and walked away. From the house, he watched through the gaps in the barn walls. It took an hour before the horse approached the food. When it finally ate, it did so violently, desperately, like someone who'd forgotten what it felt like to be full. Over the next week, Hastian established a routine. Water at dawn, hay at midday, more hay at dusk. Each time, he spoke in Navajo, sometimes about nothing, sometimes about Bosque Redondo, about the long walk, about his sister who died of smallpox in the camp, things he'd never told anyone. The horse stopped charging the gate, started eating while Hastian was still in the barn. Small victories that felt enormous. One morning, Hastian was replacing boards in the stall wall when he noticed something. Carved into the wood near the corner, a name. Defying, black sheep. The previous owner had named the horse in Navajo. That meant he'd probably bought it from Hastian's people, back when they were desperate enough to sell anything to survive. This horse had been stolen twice, first from the Navajo, then abandoned to die slowly in this barn. Hastian pressed his hand against the carving. "Defying," he said. The horse's ears flicked forward. First time it had responded to anything except food. That afternoon, while Hastian was repairing the roof, he saw them. 3 riders on the ridge to the east, too far away to identify, but close enough to be watching. They sat there for 20 minutes, then disappeared back over the hill. Hastian climbed down from the roof slowly. His hand found the rifle he'd leaned against the house. Out here, people didn't watch unless they wanted something. And men who wanted something from a Navajo living alone rarely asked nicely. 2 weeks in, and Hastian could stand inside the stall without Defying trying to kill him. Progress measured in inches and held breath. He'd started touching the horse 3 days ago. Just his hand on the neck, light as smoke. The stallion's skin twitched under his palm, but didn't pull away. This morning, Hastian ran his fingers through the tangled mane, working out burrs and dried mud. "They took everything from us," he said quietly, fingers moving through the coarse hair. "Marched us 300 miles. Women, children, elders. Anyone who couldn't walk fast enough got left behind. My mother made it 2 days." The horse's breathing slowed. Listening or just tired, Hastian couldn't tell. Didn't matter. The words needed to come out. And this animal was the only thing that wouldn't judge him for speaking them. "I was 12, old enough to remember every face we buried along the way, young enough to believe the soldiers when they said it would get better at Bosque Redondo." He laughed, bitter. 4 years in that camp. 4 years watching people starve on government rations that never came. Watching the army teach us to be ashamed of who we were. His hand found a deep scar on the horse's shoulder. Old wound, poorly healed. He grabbed the salve he'd mixed from herbs and began working it into the damaged tissue. Defying flinched, but didn't move away. "When they finally let us go home, I had no home to go back to, no family left. So I became what they wanted. A scout, a tracker, a weapon they could point at other tribes." His voice dropped. "I'm good at it. That's the worst part. I'm really good at hunting people who remind me of my dead brother." The horse turned its head and looked at him. Really looked. Something passed between them in that moment. Recognition, maybe. Two creatures shaped by cruelty into things they never chose to be. That night, Hastien was checking the fence line when he found the boot prints by the well. Fresh. Size 10, maybe 11. Deep heel mark on the right foot, like the man favored that leg. He followed the tracks to the property line, where they met up with two other sets of prints and hoof marks from 3 horses, the same riders from the ridge. He went back to the well and dropped the bucket. When it came up, he smelled it before he tasted it. Bitter. Wrong. Someone had tried to poison his water supply. Hastien dumped the bucket and stared into the darkness beyond his property. They were patient, whoever they were. Patient and stupid enough to think he wouldn't notice. He spent the rest of the night watching from the house, rifle across his lap. Just before dawn, he saw movement near the barn. Small. Quick. Not a man. A boy. Hastien was out the door before the figure, could run, catching a thin arm in the darkness. The kid couldn't be more than 15, terrified, speaking rapid Spanish. "Please, senor. Please, he made me do it. He paid me." Hastien dragged him toward the house. "Who paid you?" "Cade," the boy gasped. "Virgil Cade. He said you wouldn't sell." Hastien sat the boy down at his table and put food in front of him. Beans and cornbread, still warm from the morning fire. The kid stared at the plate like it might vanish. "Eat first," Hastien said. "Then talk." The boy's name was Miguel. His father worked on a ranch 15 miles south until Cade's men ran him off for refusing to scare homesteaders into selling. Now the family was barely surviving, and Miguel took any work he could find. "Cade pays $5 to make problems," Miguel said between bites. "Poison wells, cut fences, spook cattle. He wants people gone so he can buy cheap and sell to the railroad for 10 times the price." "The previous owner?" Hastien asked. Miguel's eyes dropped. "Cade's men killed him. Made it look like the horse did it. Everyone believed it because that horse is crazy." "Was crazy," Hastien corrected quietly. He gave Miguel $10, twice what Cade had paid him, and sent him home with a warning. "Tell Cade the Navajo knows what he did. Tell him this land isn't for sale. Tell him to stay away." 3 days later, Cade came himself. Hastien was working with Defying when he heard horses. He stepped out of the barn to find 3 men waiting. The one in front wore a suit too clean for ranch country. Round face, soft hands, eyes that calculated the value of everything they saw. "You must be the Indian," Cade said, not dismounting. "Heard you bought this place. That was foolish." Hastien said nothing. The 2 men flanking Cade had their hands near their guns. Hired killers, trying to look casual. "I'll give you $50 for the property," Cade continued. 10 times what you paid. That's generous, considering a Navajo owning land makes folks nervous. "Not for sale." Cade's smile didn't reach his eyes. "See, that's where you're confused. Everything's for sale. It's just a matter of price. I'm offering you a chance to walk away with money in your pocket and your scalp intact." Behind Hastien, Defying moved in the barn. The horse had heard the tension in the voices, recognized danger the way abused things always do. "I'll think about it," Hastien lied. "You do that." Cade turned his horse. "I'll be back in a week for your answer. And friend, there's only one right answer." After they left, Hastien stood in the yard for a long time. He'd faced down Apache warriors, tracked killers through mountains, survived things that should have destroyed him. But this was different. This was a man who killed with lawyers and hired guns, who used the law when it suited him and ignored it when it didn't. That night, smoke woke him. He ran outside to find flames eating through his hay supply, 20 feet from the barn, Ramas. Dibe Wishin. Hastien grabbed buckets, worked until his lungs burned and his hands blistered. By the time he killed the fire, half his winter feed was gone. In the dirt near the hay, someone had left a message scratched with a boot heel. 1 week. The morning after the fire, Hastien entered the barn to find Dibe Wishin pressed against the back wall, trembling. The smell of smoke had triggered something deep in the animal's memory. Whatever this horse had survived before the barn, it involved fire. Easy, Hastien murmured, moving Taming slowly. It's out. We're safe. The horse's eyes were wild again, weeks of progress threatening to unravel. Hastien did something he'd been building toward, but hadn't tried yet. He opened the stall gate and stepped inside. Fully inside. No barrier between them. Dibe Wishin could kill him with one kick. They both knew it. Hastien kept talking, low and steady, in the language his mother had used to calm him during thunderstorms. He spoke about rain and mountains, and the songs they used to sing. His hand reached out, found the horse's neck, felt the rapid pulse beneath the skin. I know you're scared, he said. I'm scared too. Cade's going to come back with more men. He's going to try to take this place and probably kill me doing it. I should run. That's what the smart part of me says. The horse's breathing began to slow. But I spent 4 years in a camp learning to be afraid. 4 more years tracking for the army, afraid of what I'd become. I'm tired of being afraid. His other hand joined the first, stroking the horse's shoulder. If I run now, I'll run forever. And I think you understand that better than anyone. He found the infected wound on Dibe Wishin's foreleg, the one he'd been trying to reach for days. The horse had always pulled away before. This time, it stood still. Let him clean it. Let him apply the salve. Trusted him with its pain. When Hastien finally left the stall 2 hours later, something had shifted between them. The horse followed him to the gate, neck stretched out, watching him go. That afternoon, Hastien rode into Cimarron. The town went quiet when he walked into the saloon. Every eye tracked him as he approached the corner table where Cade sat playing cards with 3 men who looked like they'd never worked an honest day in their lives. Your week isn't up, Cade said, not looking up from his cards. Don't need a week. The answer's no. The property's not for sale at any price, not to you or anyone else. Cade set down his cards slowly. You're making a mistake. I've made plenty of mistakes. This isn't one of them. You think these people will help you? Cade gestured around the saloon. You think anyone here gives a damn about a Navajo squatter on cursed land? You're alone, friend. And alone, men out here don't last long. Hastien met his eyes. Then I guess we'll see. He turned and walked out. Every step, he expected a bullet in his back. It didn't come. Not in front of witnesses. Not yet. But riding home, he knew the real fight was coming. Cade had made this about pride now, and men like Cade couldn't afford to look weak. Hastien started preparing that night. Moving supplies, checking ammunition, planning fields of fire around the property. If Cade wanted a war, he'd get one. Hastien spent 2 days fortifying the ranch. He moved water barrels into the barn, created cover positions behind the house and fence line, mapped every approach an attacker might use. He worked with the efficiency of a man who'd done this before, because he had. Just never for himself. On the 3rd day, Miguel returned, this time with his father. The older man's name was Roberto. He had the weathered face of someone who'd worked under the sun for 40 years, and the steady eyes of someone who'd stood up to worse than Cade. He offered his hand, and Hastien shook it. "My son told me what you did," Roberto said. "Giving him money, sending him home safe when you could have hurt him. Most men wouldn't have done that. Most men aren't desperate enough to poison wells for $5, Hastien replied. True. Roberto glanced at the barn, at the defensive positions Hastien had created. You're preparing for war. Cade's coming, probably bringing everyone he can pay. Then you'll need help. Roberto gestured behind him. 2 more men had ridden up. One was black, maybe 60, with a scar running down his face. The other was white, young, couldn't be more than 25. This is Solomon. Used to work for Cade until he figured out what kind of man he was working for. And this is Jack. He's nobody, but he shoots straight. Hastien looked at them. Why? Solomon spoke first. Because I spent 20 years watching men like Cade take what they want from people who can't fight back. I'm tired of watching. And you? Hastien asked Jack. The young man shrugged. My pa lost his ranch to Cade 2 years ago. Drank himself to death after. I figure I owe Cade a bullet, and you're giving me a chance to deliver it legal. By sunset, they'd established a perimeter. Roberto and Miguel took the east ridge. Solomon covered the south approach. Jack positioned himself near the house. Hastien stayed near the barn, where he could protect Defying. As darkness fell, Hastien brought the horse out of the stall for the first time in months, led him into the open barn area, where there was more room to move if things went bad. He'd fashioned a rough blanket from an old tarp, and now he laid it across the horse's back. Defying's muscles tensed. Every instinct told the animal to buck, to fight, to reject this thing that felt like control. Hastien kept his hand on the horse's neck, kept speaking in Navajo, kept breathing steady. Slowly, the horse relaxed, accepted the weight, accepted the trust Hastien was asking for. We might die tonight, Hastien said quietly, but at least we'll die as something more than what they tried to make us. The horse turned its head and pressed its nose against Hastien's chest. First real affection the animal had ever shown. First time Hastien had felt truly connected to another living thing since Bosque Redondo. Then Solomon's voice cut through the darkness. They're coming. Hastien looked toward the ridge and saw the torches. 8 of them. Maybe more. Cade had brought an army. The riders came fast, expecting to overwhelm a single man. Instead, they rode into crossfire. Solomon's rifle cracked first, dropping the lead horse. Roberto and Miguel opened up from the ridge, forcing 3 riders to break left. Jack's shotgun boomed from near the house, and suddenly, Cade's hired guns realized this wasn't going to be easy money. Hastien stayed low behind the water trough, tracking movement in the darkness. He'd fought in worse situations with the army, but never for something that mattered, never for something that was his. A bullet splintered wood above his head. He returned fire, saw a man grab his shoulder, and fall from his saddle. The attackers scattered, regrouping behind the fallen fence line. You can't win this, Cade's voice carried across the property. I've got 8 men and all night. You've got what? 4? 5? Do the math, Indian. Hastien didn't answer. Talking wasted ammunition. The second wave came from 2 directions. Smart. Solomon had to choose which group to engage, leaving the south approach partially exposed. 2 riders broke through, heading straight for the barn. For Defying. Hastian ran, not toward cover, not toward safety, directly toward the barn where the horse was trapped. He heard Jack yelling at him to get down, heard bullets kicking up dirt at his feet, but none of it mattered. That horse had trusted him with a blanket on its back. He wasn't going to let it die because of his fight. He hit the barn door as the first rider arrived. The man raised his pistol, and Hastian shot him out of the saddle. The second rider fired wild, the bullet punching through the barn wall inches from where Defying stood, the sound of wood exploding, the smell of gunpowder, the chaos of men shouting and dying. Every nightmare the horse had ever survived came flooding back at once. Defying screamed and kicked through the stall gate. Broken wood, broken metal. Pure animal panic made physical. The horse bolted past Hastian, straight into the middle of the firefight, running blind toward the muzzle flashes and smoke. Hastian's heart stopped. He'd spent months teaching that animal to trust again, and now it was going to die in the crossfire because of him. He didn't think, just ran after the horse, calling its name in Navajo. Defying, Shiei, come to me! The horse spun in the darkness, confused, terrified. Men were shooting all around them. Jack was screaming at Hastian to get down. Solomon's rifle kept firing, and Hastian stood in the open with bullets cutting the air, one hand extended, speaking the language of his childhood to a horse that should have trampled him. Time collapsed. The horse looked at him, really looked, and then, against every instinct that said run, against every lesson that said humans bring only pain, Defying ran straight back to him. Hastian grabbed the mane and pulled himself onto the horse's bare back in one motion. His rifle in one hand, the other tangled in coarse hair, he turned the horse toward Cade's position. "Now," he whispered, "now we end this." They rode through the chaos like a storm given flesh. Defying moved with purpose now, no longer running from fear, but toward it. Hastian felt the horse's power beneath him, months of pain and healing condensed into pure forward momentum. Cade's men saw them coming, a Navajo warrior on a massive Appaloosa, charging through gunfire like something out of their worst nightmares. The image broke something in them. These were hired guns, not soldiers. They'd signed up to intimidate farmers, not face down a man who looked like he'd already died once and didn't care if it happened again. 3 of them ran, just dropped their weapons, and rode off into the darkness. The others hesitated, and hesitation in a gunfight is the same as surrender. Hastian fired twice, not aiming to kill, but to scatter. The men dove for cover. Cade was behind the overturned wagon, and Hastian drove the horse straight at him. At the last second, Defying jumped the wagon. They cleared it by inches, landed hard on the other side, and Cade found himself staring up at a rifle barrel. "Call them off," Hastian said. Cade's hand went for his pistol. Stupid. Hastian kicked it from his grip, and the weapon skittered into the dirt. Around them, the gunfire had stopped. Everyone watching this moment, understanding it, would determine how the rest of the night played out. "You're going to kill me in front of witnesses?" Cade tried to sound brave. Failed. Hastian thought about it. Really thought about it. This man had killed the previous owner, had tried to poison his well, had burned his hay, had sent men to destroy the one thing Hastian had built for himself. Every instinct from his years as a scout said put a bullet in him and be done with it. But sitting on Defying's back, feeling the horse's steadiness beneath him, Hastian realized something. The old warrior would have killed Cade, would have done it efficiently and without regret. But that warrior had died somewhere between the stall gate and this moment. Leave, Hastian said. Take your men and leave. If I see any of you on my property again, I won't be this kind. He turned the horse and rode back toward the barn. Didn't look back. Didn't need to. Behind him, he heard Cade scrambling to his feet, heard the remaining hired guns gathering their wounded, heard the sound of retreat. Roberto appeared at his side as he dismounted. You should have killed him. Probably, Hastian agreed. But I've killed enough men for one lifetime. Solomon walked over, reloading his rifle. He'll come back. Men like that always do. Maybe, but not tonight. Hastian ran his hand down Dibe Wijin's neck, checking for injuries. The horse was breathing hard, but unharmed. And by the time he tries again, people will know what happened here. They'll know a Navajo and his horse stood their ground, and Cade ran. Jack joined them, grinning despite the blood on his sleeve. That was the craziest thing I've ever seen. You rode into gunfire. The horse did most of the work, Hastian said quietly. But his hand never left Dibe Wijin's mane, and the horse pressed closer, as if understanding they'd saved each other tonight. The sheriff arrived at dawn with 6 deputies. Hastian was in the barn checking Dibe Wijin's legs when he heard the horses. His hand went to his rifle, but Roberto stepped out first, hands visible. We sent for him, Roberto explained. Last night. Figured you'd need the law on your side when Cade started lying. Cade was already there, sitting on his horse with a bandage on his head he definitely didn't have during the fight. Playing victim. The sheriff, a gray-haired man named Garrett, looked tired. Mr. Cade says you ambushed his men while they were riding past your property, Garrett said. That's interesting, Hastian replied, considering they attacked at midnight and left 8 shell casings on my land. He gestured to the ground. You're welcome to count them. Solomon stepped forward. I was here, watched the whole thing. Cade brought hired guns to run this man off his legal property. He's lying, Cade snapped. They're all lying to protect him. All 5 of us, Jack asked. All lying the same lie? That's impressive coordination for folks who just met. The sheriff dismounted and walked the property. Saw the bullet holes in the barn, the burned hay, the defensive positions that made it clear Hastian had been expecting an attack, not starting one. He picked up one of the shell casings, examined it, then looked at Cade. This is a 44-40, same as what your men carry. He picked up another. This one's different caliber. And this one. Lot of different guns for one ambush, Cade. They shot first, Cade tried. From defensive positions? Garrett's voice hardened. I'm tired of your games. You've been running people off their land for 2 years, and I've had to look the other way because you've got friends in Santa Fe. But you made a mistake this time. You came after a man who was ready for you, and now you're standing on my land telling me lies I can disprove by looking at the ground. Cade's face went red. You can't prove anything. I can prove you attacked legal property with armed men. That's attempted murder. Garrett turned to his deputies. Escort Mr. Cade out of the territory. If he's still here by sundown, arrest him. Cade opened his mouth, closed it, then looked at Hastian with pure hatred. This isn't over. Yeah, Hastian said quietly. It is. They watched Cade and his remaining men ride out. When they were gone, Garrett turned to Hastian. You're lucky. Most judges won't side with a Navajo against a white landowner, even when the Navajo's right. I know. So why stay? Why fight for this place? Hastian looked at the barn, where Dibe Wijin stood watching him. Because I spent too many years running from places that should have been home. This might not be much, but it's mine, and I'm done running. Garrett nodded slowly. Fair enough, Just try not to kill anyone next time." "Next time," Hastian said. "There won't be anyone stupid enough to try." 6 months passed like water finding its level. The ranch transformed slowly. Roberto and Miguel came back to help repair the fences. Solomon stayed on, building a small cabin on the eastern edge of the property in exchange for a place to belong. Jack drifted away after a month, but sent 2 other men who'd lost land to speculators and needed work. Word spread about the Navajo who'd stood down Cade, and people started showing up. Not many, just the ones who had nowhere else to go. Hastian didn't turn them away. He understood what it meant to need a place to stand. Defying became something extraordinary. The wild, broken horse transformed into an animal that moved with Hastian like they shared one mind. Hastian trained him properly now, teaching him to respond to pressure and voice commands. The horse learned fast, as if making up for lost time. People traveled from neighboring ranches to see them work together. A Navajo and an Appaloosa that shouldn't have trusted each other, moving through exercises with a precision that looked like poetry. Some offered to buy the horse. Hastian refused every offer. One evening, a woman arrived from Cimarron. She was Navajo, maybe 40, with silver in her hair and recognition in her eyes. "I heard about you," she said in their language. "Heard about the man who bought cursed land and tamed the devil horse." "The land wasn't cursed," Hastian replied in the same tongue. "And the horse was never a devil. We were just both trying to survive." She smiled. "My name is Desba. I run a trading post in town. Been hearing stories about a warrior who speaks our language to horses and makes broken things whole again." "I'm not a warrior anymore." "No," she agreed, looking at the ranch, at the men working the fields, at Defying standing calm in the corral. "You're something better. You're a builder." That night, Hastian stood in the barn with the horse. He pressed his forehead against Defying's neck and spoke in Navajo about how far they'd come. $5 had bought him 60 acres. But it had bought him so much more than land. It bought him a way back to himself, a way to stop being the weapon the army had made him and start being the man his mother raised. It bought him a community of broken people finding ways to heal together. It bought him mornings without shame and nights without nightmares. Most of all, it bought him this horse. This impossible, furious, magnificent creature that had been just as trapped as he was, just as desperate for someone to see past the damage to what lived underneath. "We saved each other," he whispered. "That's what $5 bought." The horse exhaled softly, warm breath against his skin, and Hastian closed his eyes. For the first time since Bosque Redondo, since the long walk, since all those years of running and tracking and bleeding, he felt something he'd thought was gone forever. He felt home. So if you found this story as powerful as I did, do me a favor and click that subscribe button, because tomorrow I've got another story about an impossible bond that'll remind you why second chances matter. And seriously, hit that like button if this one touched your heart. These stories need to be shared, and you sharing them makes all the difference.